I'm just sorry, I something just need to get rid of it. Okay, so welcome everybody. I can't see everybody on the call. I did when I quickly went through, saw that there definitely are people that I do know. I noticed Debbie was there, and Debbie in herself is a great leader and also runs a fantastic forum, the Quality Life Organization. So I feel very humbled to be amongst many experts. Thanks for giving me a space. I'm sure everybody could occupy this space and fill it with their wisdom. So we're going to kind of have a conversation, and I'm going to focus on how to have effective meetings, which seems to be the holy grail of most businesses and most relationships, actually, how to actually come together and to team properly and do it so that the outcome is exactly what you want. So when I'm going to build a frame around today's workshop, which is focusing around business meetings, but everything that I am saying and everything that, and all the work I've done translates equally well, whether you are a multinational global corporation, if you are an individually run entrepreneurial business, or if you are a small business, or even if you are in your family and you're wanting to have some conversations and meetings, because everybody's got to make different decisions at the moment with the world being where it is, families coming together, talking about the future, focusing, pulling together and trying to use that time to hear each other and get the best out of everybody. So this can be handled, and hopefully the things that I'm going to talk about can be applied at many levels. Those of you who know me know that I like being controversial. So I am going to, in terms of being a myth buster, I'm going to tackle some of the conventional wisdom. And please feel free to post agreements, disagreements, questions in the chat, and we can hopefully continue this. Afterwards, I'll share my email and all of you and my WhatsApp number, and you can all feel free to continue having the conversation, because obviously it's a big one and we can't get through everything. So the very first thing, oopsie, what's going on here? Sorry. Let's try the very first myth around meetings is that when you say the word, we've got to go to a meeting, especially in a business context, everybody rolls their eyes. And so my first point of departure is to say that the greatest myth, in other words, belief that we all adopt, is that meetings are inherently bad. They're bad for people, they're bad for work, they're bad for leaders, they're bad, they just don't work. So we're going to tackle and unpack that myth. I thought I would want you all, because everybody's had an experience of meetings at some form or another. So just to kind of join me in the conversation, I wanted to do the miracle question, to ask you, imagine that we all went to sleep tonight.
Hello.
Tracy?
Hello.
Lost sound.
No sound.
I think Elana lost connectivity.
Let me just call her.
Okay.
I'm back. Trace, can you hear me?
Oh,
hello?
Yes, we can hear
I'm
you
back.
now, Elana. Yes.
Sorry, I think I lost internet connectivity for a minute. I'm just going to share my screen very quickly again. Sorry, wrong one. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to ask everybody to join me and think about their own experience of meetings. Just kind of center yourself. Imagine that during the night, a miracle has occurred. You wake up in the morning and you know something different has happened in the world. You then start your day and you go to your first meeting of the day, and immediately you know something new has happened. So my question to all of you is, I want you to look around you in your dream and notice that meetings are exciting, relevant, worthwhile, value creating. What is everybody doing in these exciting, relevant, valuable meetings? What are they talking about? How are they doing it? Just maybe take a few moments and write down the top 3 things that come in as you look around in this wonderful new world. Just, and if you post them in the chat, that would be great. And as they come in, Trace, you can just let me know about them. How are we doing? I'm sorry, I can't see the chat. Are any things coming in?
No, nothing's come through yet.
Okay. Does that mean we're not dreaming this morning, or we can't imagine a world where meetings are exciting, worthwhile, relevant, value creating?
So Debbie has said there is a deep connection and creativity to imagine new possibilities together. Ellis has said inspired, relieved, calm. And Sylvia has said developing new solutions.
Right. Those are such fantastic, clear dreams. And I think they're part of speaking to all of us in terms of what we dream and hope for. So it's quite hard for some of us to let go of what we have experienced, because when we talk about something like meetings, there is a big legacy that we are inheriting. This legacy is passed down to us, and we kind of have a negative idea, and our culture around meetings, in other words, our behavior and the way that we then turn up when we've got to go to a meeting, when we're preparing for a meeting, when we're entering a meeting that somebody we don't like has called, or somebody we have a difference of opinion, or we're in to discuss a topic and we want to sell an idea. All of this, we have some inherited behaviors. And part of what I'm going to ask you to do is to really examine what your legacy view is around meetings, because it is true, like with any unexamined and unconscious beliefs are really our operating system. They kind of design and set the tone for our behavior. So what is our learned bias? So Peter Drucker, quite a while ago in the 70s, made this very controversial statement that the human dynamics of meetings are so complex as to make them very, very poor tools for getting any work done. And so many of the businesses and the executives and the businesses, both small, medium, and very, very large, that I engage with have this learned bias. It's a bias and it's an experience. And it's kind of something that we start off with. The reason I've used that graphic is we also learn how to behave in meetings from the people around us. And as a general sense, every time I enter an organization, I notice that as a business and as a society, we have come to accept that meetings are unavoidably painful and unproductive. They're kind of one of the necessary evils of life as we know it. You can't fix them. They are generally, at best, debilitating and at worst, tedious. They kind of are unnecessary, and it's something we have to suffer through. And the truth is that in most organizations, when meetings are run as formalities, in other words, they're scheduled into the diary, we have a management meeting, we have a staff meeting, we have a departmental meeting, we have even something like an award meeting. It kind of tends to set up this learned bias in our mind, and that kind of drains the energy and kills momentum for performance because of the way that we tend to frame our own thoughts going into a meeting. So what really is the real problem that makes meetings so bad? And this is going to be a little controversial, and I'm interested in your views. And as I said, if there are things that really jar because you can't make sense of them, or things that you love, please use the chat to communicate. But really what I'm saying is that in my experience, and as Tracy says, I've collected quite a lot of experience, and I can say that I've been privileged to work in many organizations when after the toolkit that I have based on the logic that I'm going to be discussing with all of you, when we implement that as a process, that dream that Debbie and other people spoke about really comes true. It's a way to make dreams come true, because the real problem in meetings is twofold, in my opinion and in my experience. And actually, there are quite a few people writing about this as well. Firstly, they're boring. And secondly, they're ineffective. They're boring because they lack drama or conflict. If there is conflict in a meeting, it's all passive aggressive or just plain aggressive. There is no creativity. There is no real curiosity. There is no real connectivity. People go in to take a position. That is not conflict. That is aggression. Conflict as a concept, when it becomes down to interpersonal behavior, is something where we have a different opinion on things, but we acknowledge that the outcome we want generally can help us find a way to integrate both of those things. So the very first thing that people have to learn in order to have good meetings is they have to be able to cope with conflict, to cope with drama, and to have the interpersonal emotional intelligence to bring themselves fully, not to hold back, but at the same time to have the respect and humility to actually adopt a curiosity about how people arrived. You don't have to agree, but you have to examine how did somebody else arrive at the conclusion that they have, instead of just adopting this, they're stupid, they have an ego, they've got their own agenda. We tend to kind of attribute a whole lot of weaponization of conflict in business. So the first thing is meetings are boring. People sit there, the real conversations are not being had, they're all out in the corridors. Also, attending a meeting often is people come into the meeting carrying the mandate. In other words, they've had another meeting before, reached a conclusion, and they're coming into this meeting to represent that community. The second reason is that meetings lack contextual structure. Now, this is a very big point of departure for me. I find that most of the businesses have gone through some sort of training where they talk about the tools and techniques of meetings. I don't use any of those in the same way. I'm saying that a contextual structure for a meeting is simply three things. You need to know what results you want, not what you want to do. Most people say, I'm going to have this meeting so we can do this. They talk about the activity. They don't really understand clearly enough before they engage in a meeting, what will a successful result look like? So understanding the contextual structure, I want to have this conversation, and you'll see I'm going to tell you one of the key simple things is I never want you to use the word meeting again. I'll use it here, but I teach and I hope to instill a new paradigm because of our learned bias and our legacy, where we replace the word meeting with conversation. So I'm having a conversation tomorrow with you about achieving this result. So we reframe and we build contextual structure, and we also remind ourselves of what really we're there to do. So meetings create a lot of hullabaloo in business, and rightly so, because it is, again, a controversial view, but my view that if I'm called into a business, again, no matter what size, no matter what scope, and I sit in a meeting and observe it, and I experience poor connection, poor contextual understanding, poor commitment, boringness, I know that bad meetings reflect bad leadership. And that's quite I've called it hullabaloo. The reason is most leaders or anyone who calls a meeting tends to forgive themselves for not holding an effective, contextually relevant, inspirational, non-boring meeting by saying that, meetings are a waste of time. I don't have to take responsibility. It's up to everybody else in the meeting. And I often say to the leaders I work with, to say that you hate meetings, and so many people do hate meetings, is like a surgeon who were to say, I hate operating on people. That's their basic work. Or a symphony conductor who says, I hate concerts. If a leader or a manager hates meetings, they are now declaring themselves to be somebody who wants to work on their own and do everything themselves, which kind of negates what their work is. So I'm claiming that meetings and the business conversations are the birthplace and the burial place of business morale, the single point from which conflict, dispassion, and ultimately lethargy emanates. I can generally predict, and I'm encouraging you all to look around at the meetings you attend, or those that you host, or those that you observe, and to notice that the morale in the room, if some people are died out, if some kinds of ego boundaries exist, in other words, some people are more important than other people, some people are only called on and never risk taking any position, other people dominate. That kind of gives you a sense of the morale. Remember, morale is like weather. It's climate. It can change. It's not a forever thing. But you can destroy morale by having a poor meeting. It also, meetings, and this will be the next point that I'm making, so conversation is a new idea. The second thing is that meetings are business processes. They are how you run your business. Therefore, they become the single point from which conflict then is taken forward, or dispassion, disinterest, even giving up happens in terms of what is going to happen next. So I often will say, in a business, in any interpersonal exchange, even in a family, what is more important than having effective meetings? Nothing, because it comes down to conversations. If you can't have effective conversations which generate results, which generate interpersonal connectivity, which generate capability, creativity, then really you're going to struggle at every level. So most people, whether it's long ago when they were on a sports team, or when they were a student planning a dance, or in the family, when the family was planning something special, or in a business where there was going to be a new acquisition, most people have experienced great meetings or great conversations, which left them feeling we're aligned, we know exactly what we want to achieve. We also can predict and have full trust that going forward, what we're expecting from each other, since we've connected and committed to this, is predictable. That's the problem about not having some of the routines in meetings that's in my toolkit, is even when you agree on something and you have a great meeting and you say, right, we're decided. Since meetings are business processes, not events, your capacity to predict what's going to happen after the meeting. So two parties or two departments or two businesses come together and reach agreement. Now what has to happen next? If you don't contract the feed forward action, in other words, the actions, results, activities that you would now expect from one another given the agreement, it becomes very unpredictable. And again, you start to break down relationships, because I go out and I go, I really would have expected Tracy to do this. And I carry that in my head. She then sends me an email about how she's handling something. And I'm like, I don't think we're actually on the same page anymore. It would have been better at the moment of agreement to talk about, let's just quickly brainstorm. What would you expect to happen next from me? And what would I? And again, if there's differences, we need to iron them out. So since we do come together to have conversations and meetings, for the purposes of this workshop, let's call it meetings, but it really is a new word of conversations. I often ask my clients who have lots of meetings and who hate them, I say, what work can you do in a meeting? So maybe just very quickly in the chat, put down what work can be done in a meeting. I'd like to just collect the wisdom of the people who are on the call with me. What work can you do in a meeting? Again, just give me your top 3 things.
No posts in the chat yet.
Nothing in the chat yet. Is everybody still here, or they're doing other things? Or they're at a loss? When you call a meeting, what are the kinds of things you want to achieve? What do you want to do? What activities do you do in a meeting?
Odette has said to plan. I also said
Nice.
to plan, implement, and deadlines. Corinne has said
Fantastic.
the royal we will do this or that. That's a cop-out. As who's the we need to be specific with regards to the person that needs to do the task. Ella says operational change and strategy.
Okay.
Pushka says strategy, and Simon has said follow an agenda, achieve an objective, and get an agreement.
Nice, nice. Okay, so those are, all of those things are kind of activities. We use meetings to do typically these kinds of activities that you've all said. We use them to make a decision, to share information, to update each other. We call a meeting to say, let's get on the same page and share our opinions. We call a meeting to say, we have this problem. Let's brainstorm. Let's see what everybody's thoughts are. We call a meeting because we want to solve a problem rather than just generate an idea. Or we need information from other people to have a deeper understanding. We acknowledge that what we see and understand of a problem may be different to the other people who may be more at the coalface. So we want to gain clarity or deepen the understanding of the issue and put everybody on the same page. We use meetings to clarify or set expectations. This is what I expect from you. This is the results that I want. To reach agreement, to contract. Okay, we've made a deal now. If it's a sales meeting or if it's between a supplier and a customer, this is what we are now contracting. We use meetings to test for understanding. Am I right if I do this? Will you support me if I do that? To show support to one another, to say, I really want to hear what Lorato's plans are so that I can get behind them and offer support. We use meetings to express disagreement. We use meetings to plan implementation or design action plans. As I think it was Simon who said, we kind of set up an agenda to do many of these activities and to achieve a result. And then we leap into the meeting and we get busy with having those conversations. So how do we manage those conversations in a way that we feel becomes sensible and where people can actually get the results that they seek? So the contrarian view that I have is that I do not believe that the key to improving meetings, the key can be attributed to better preparation, better agendas, or better minutes. I think it's part of the component, but I have seen so many business people go on countless workshops, come back with a whole lot of discipline and structure, and it doesn't necessarily create an improved conversation or an improved result. Not to say it's not valuable, but it's not been, in my experience, the key. So if you replace the word meeting with the word conversation, and you then take those disciplines and say, okay, if I'm about to have a conversation with my child, with my husband, with my employee who I'm dissatisfied with my performance, with my stakeholder, with my owner, with my boss, with my subordinate, with my team, what is the conversation that I want to have? And you then use that idea to prepare yourself, to set an agenda. You don't base meetings on minutes. So many meetings I attend, especially formal meetings, which become events, the whole focus is to go through the minutes, which means that we had a meeting a week ago, we agreed to some action, we now get together again to review those actions. The truth is that the outcomes of a meeting need to be not about the activity, but the results that were underneath that activity. So for instance, if we say that we are going to monitor. I'll just use the example of, say, my business, Frangelica's. So if I say we have a meeting and we agree that over the next week, we're going to monitor what our top sales items are. When we meet a week later, we don't want to be asking the person who took that, okay, what did you do to monitor it? We want to enter that meeting knowing what our top sales items were and use the meeting now to do something with that information rather than just catch ourselves up on what the output a week ago. Because then can you see the timeline is we're having the conversation in big bites without really moving forward at the pace that we want. So I'm saying that you need to focus on structuring and leading your conversations, not just the activities that you're going to be anticipating. You need to see meetings as working spaces, not routines. In other words, in my example, since we will be coming back in with a clear view of what our top sales are, what then top sellers are, what do we want to achieve in this meeting? Because that information is an input to the meeting. We cannot come out agreeing on what our top sellers are. That's not enough. We need to actually decide in this working space, we will agree them, but much better than that, we will decide what that means and what we're going to do going forward. So we want to focus on meetings as business processes where we say, what are the inputs? Who needs to be in the meeting? Why? What are we actually going to discuss? Not, this is a scheduled meeting, it's a management meeting, it's got all these things on the agenda. Every week we go through the same routines and we very rarely actually get any real value from those routines. Most people, if I just go back to that for a second, most people would struggle with that because they've learned that a good meeting has got structure. In other words, we set an agenda based on the time and we cover the agenda. I challenge that. I say, if you've got a meeting, you need to know before you have the meeting, what are the important issues to discuss? Otherwise, you're going to lack drama and you're going to lack contextual understanding. People come together to follow the agenda instead of meet or have a conversation about the critical things they need to meet or have a conversation about. So just now I'm going to show you the business process side. And in my toolkit, I generally have a whole lot of different questions that I would ask somebody who's initiating or running a meeting on a consistent basis to think about between their meetings that enables that meeting that they're attending, that conversation, to become a real working space, even if it means departing from the structured agenda, because it would be better to spend an hour doing something that everybody cares about rather than working through the agenda and now you could have another meeting with the same people to actually tackle something that's relevant to all of them. So what gets in the way of what I'm saying? Again, back to our learned ideas. There is a deeply held belief in my experience and evidence of it that I've collected that people opt out very quickly. There is this belief that good teams, if you're a good team, you can work together easily. It's a little bit like saying, if you're in a good relationship, you work together easily. And what I'm saying is that's simply not true, because whether it's teams or whether it's relationships, they are made up of imperfect human beings and are therefore inherently dysfunctional. You, me, everybody else with our humanity is not going to turn up without dysfunctionality. So working together with people, teaming with people, which is the new competitive advantage, not so much team building, not so much managing time and meetings, but really being able to team, work collectively and walk together with other people in a way that stimulates creativity and excitement is really a new muscle that we have to develop. And we have to face the mirror and go that there is inherent humanity and dysfunctionality when we try and work together. The second myth is that structure and preparation create effective meetings. You can have the best structure, you can have the best will, But if there are some interpersonal dynamics that are going to manifest in meetings, you are going to struggle. So let me make that practical. I may have to work with somebody in my business who I inherently feel is not on the same page as me. So I have a pre-meeting, I share all the information, I explain the structure of the agenda, I ask that person to prepare, they come into the meeting. Both of us come into the meeting carrying our perceptions of each other, and we filter the meeting content through that. So when he or she talks, I hear my own belief more than their ideas. And if we were able to do this practically, we would illustrate it. So what is demanded of me is to put aside those filters and really tune in. Like, I think it was Debbie who said, to really connect, okay, if this person is saying this, what is going on for them? What do they need? What is really being asked? How are they wanting me to understand them? And really, the problem about humanity is I can do that once. I can have one meeting where I get it right, but then 10 minutes later, I don't want to have to do it again with someone else and someone else. And the next week, I don't want to have to, I get totally, you know, in the helping profession, we talk about compassion fatigue. I say in business, we get conversational fatigue, which is exactly the same dynamic. And we just kind of want to give up, because the way to have effective conversations is not difficult to understand, but it is difficult and relentless to put in practice day after day, hour after hour, moment after moment, human being after human being. That is what makes meetings feel like they're such hard work, is that internal resilience that we need. So meetings are hard work. What is hard work is not understanding the constructs. In fact, they're simple to understand. It's difficult to actually bring it into a practice every single time. And effective meetings are primarily dependent on behaviors and self-awareness skills for all parties. So if you want to transform the quality of teaming in a business and in a relationship and in a family, you have to start going beyond the tactics and the techniques that we want to bring to the table, because that's our best guess at how we can take control of the dynamics. But I'm saying the dynamics are quite simply the core of having an effective business conversation, and in fact, an effective any conversation. So right back to what I said, if meetings are the birthplace of morale and the birthplace of lethargy or energy, then high performance is built in a meeting. If I have a great meeting with my partner, my boss, my reportee, I leave that meeting feeling so energized and so ready to do difficult things. If I have a poor meeting, I can feel exactly the opposite, and my capacity to perform is halved, if not quartered. And I've seen this over and over again. So I'm saying that effective meetings come from three aspects. And what I'm saying is not unique. I'm just putting a lot of what we call the soft skills into a business context of holding effective meetings. And I'm kind of creating a deepening of some of the structures and tools that we've learned. So I say three aspects: the quality of behavior, how people treat each other within the meeting, and that demands a level of consciousness. The quality of thinking, real debate, which stimulates depth and breadth of ideas while teasing out implicit assumptions that lie at the core of all thinking. We all arrive at our conclusions based on assumptions. We never test those assumptions. We rather engage at that percussion or discussion, which is the same sound level, where we kind of go, but I can't agree with that. But I think you're wrong. But have you considered this? Instead of asking, if you say that, what assumptions lie underneath it? And helping people to unpack that. That becomes real quality thinking, and it means that the ideas around the table can really be examined. So effective meetings, you need to have quality behavior, inside a meeting and between meetings. You need to have quality thinking, which means real commitment, debate, opinions being openly shared without fear and without hostility. And then you have to have good quality actions. In other words, that once, even if you have a great meeting, it's worth nothing if you aren't able to predict how that is going to affect the next day, the next week between the meetings. So we have to manage the input process. We have to manage the event or the throughput. We have to manage the going forward or the feed forward. I often say that we should take feedback out of meetings when I consult, and I've seen amazing results, those people who've had the guts to try it, and only talk about feed forward. So we meet to feed forward, not to feed back. In order to do this, I base a lot of my toolkit on the work of Patrick Lencioni, who came up with 5 dysfunctions that he believes lie at the core of why people don't know how to team. And so what he's really saying is it's a pyramid, but if we start at the broadest base on the right, he's saying that most meetings are characterized by an absence of trust. What that means is the willingness to say, I don't have the answers, I'm not sure of what I'm doing, who's got a better idea. I would really like you guys to consider whether my idea could work, and if so, what it would take. So really putting down our defenses. And I'm not talking about la la land, I'm talking about tough business conversations, but where people are prepared to be vulnerable and to demonstrate that they will and can trust each other. If you have low vulnerability trust, you are going to have fear of conflict, because somebody who's not prepared to own up is never going to be able to have a decent, high quality interrogative conversation. If you have low trust, low real conflict, in other words, the meeting is boring and people are disengaged, you will have lack of commitment. Even if at the end of the meeting you say, we've decided this, I now expect everybody to adopt it. Remember, commitment is not an emotional thing. It's not like, yes, I agree, or no, I disagree. Commitment is, how am I going to action this? If we want to achieve this and we say that that's what we committed to do, what is the actions going forward that will create that result? I find teams, I have like a little questionnaire, who always rate themselves high on commitment, because most people get out of bed to do a good job. But when we interrogate what the behavioral dimensions of commitment are, very few businesses and relationships are characterized by them. If you have low accountability, low commitment, it is absolutely true that you are really going to struggle to create peer accountability, because peer accountability is not so much me holding my partner or my subordinate or my whatever, my other members of the team accountable. Peer accountability is me feeling like my delivery and non-delivery impacts your non-delivery. And I feel a great deal of responsibility to carry what I have to do in order to facilitate what we're trying to do here. So we shift the burden to kind of managing people at that level, to everybody starting to take a real deep view about whether or not they are focused on the results of the team, whether or not they are really invested in what the total business picture is, or if they're more invested in their own department or their own silo. So what I've kind of said here is that if you want to embed on the right those 5, turn them from dysfunctions to functions, leaders have to be able to focus or force collective outcomes. They need to be able to confront difficult issues and help their team do that. They need to force clarity and closure during a meeting with the feed forward. They need to mine for real conflict, not by asking who agrees or who disagrees, but really testing what are the assumptions that we're making when we say this is what we want to do. And leaders need to put down their defenses and be able to role model real trust. So these are some of the ideas that are embedded in actually busting the myths of meetings. We also need to move from a place where we are unconsciously incompetent through a place where we become consciously incompetent, where we notice what we're doing wrong. But then we have to build the skills to become consciously competent. And unfortunately, like driving a car, the minute we've learned something, we become unconsciously competent. And we know we can get from A to B. We just forget all the things we do to get there. So the hardest part in any business where you're trying to create effectiveness is moving from conscious incompetence to conscious competence, because most people don't like sitting in those two boxes. When I'm consciously incompetent, I have to face that I'm impatient and that I really don't want to attend meetings and that I've got a projected view of other people around me. I have to really own that and say that makes it difficult for me to really team with other people. I can then learn some skills, but then I have to concentrate on the work. And I don't like that as well. I find it exhausting. I want to either be unconsciously incompetent, like this is me, take it or leave it, or I want to be unconsciously competent, knowing I get this right, but not knowing what I do, so I can't dial into it when I need it. So the last controversial idea that I want to say is whenever people and businesses tell me that they hate meetings, and remember I'm swapping meetings for conversations, I say all businesses need to have more meetings, not less meetings, but they need to see meetings through a lens like these M&Ms or Smarties, where you have many different kinds of meetings and not the same routines. You understand how to use meetings as working space. If you want to reach agreement on something and the real work you want to do is be generative, then you need one kind of meeting. If you have already been generative and now you want to narrow down and talk about making a decision and deciding what work then it's going to take, you need a different meeting. I often use the analogy of being a program director on a TV channel, which is always dicey because I don't think I know enough about it. But if you're running a TV channel, you will know that you have series, you have news programs, you have movies. What's the difference between those different programs is that a series is something that's got a predictable structure, you know the characters, you know the essence of it, but every week a new incident happens within that constraint. That would be what like a management meeting is. On the other hand, you have movies, which are like a long saga where you start at one place and you end at another and you have to build up all your knowledge. That would be like a strategy meeting that you have maybe once a quarter, or a planning meeting where you're actually going to start right at the beginning and build an understanding and then move to the results that you want. Different kind of meeting, different way in which you're going to structure it. On the other hand, you have news programs which are to update you on what's going on in the world, but most TV channels will have, as well as their news, while the news channel is going on, they have like that ticker tape that runs along the bottom, which means that if you're brushing your teeth or brushing your hair, or putting on your makeup or shaving in the morning, you can follow that for maybe a minute, maybe 30 seconds, and pick up everything that's topical. So you need those kind of ticker tape meetings, probably daily at the beginning, but they need to be quick and they need to not be a deep dive into anything. And then you need news kind of meetings, and then you need sort of talk shows where you take one topic and you dissect it. So if you think about those different kinds of conversations and the flavors, you'll see that we need a variety. We need more meetings and more variety. When we are choosing it, we need to create a business flow, because I said to you, meetings or conversations are really a business process, not an event. So you need to really focus on surrounding your meeting, making sure that you choose the correct type of meeting, like I've just said, all those varieties. Build your agenda on your outcome, not your activity. Not like we need to get together to update each other. The real point is, what work are you trying to do? Updating is an activity. If you're all updated, what work do you want to do? You need to make sure that the right people are in the room or have given input before. And you need to focus much of your energy not on feedback, not on understanding what took place between this meeting and the last, but on feed forward. What do we need to take place between this and the next, and committing to the results you expect if that actions take place. In other words, if I say we're going to collect data on what our top sellers are, if we do that, what do we expect? We then will come to the meeting with the best view on 5 products that we think we could take out of the menu. Now we know what we're going to do in that meeting. We're actually going to discuss which products we need to drop, not just understand which our top sellers are. I use a process that I encourage everybody to do. No matter what your meeting, no matter how many items in your agenda, I talk about topping and tailing. I use a bean. You know, if you've ever prepared a salad or wanted to use beans in cooking, you know, you need to top and tail them. In other words, you need to cut off both those growth points, the tail and the tip of the bean. And what I'm saying is that's what you need to do if you're running a meeting. You need to tell people you top it. This is the work I've come here to do. At the end of today's meeting, I want us to have agreed on 5 products that we're going to drop. Then you're going to say, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to kind of just throw ideas. So you then say what you're going to do. And at the end of your section, you say, okay, we have now talked about these 5, that's tailing it. The next thing we need to do is to say, if we are going to do that, how are we going to take action between this meeting and the next? And you need to utilize that 5 dysfunctional model, which I have used, but I've built 38 behaviors that you can use to run your meeting effectively. So this is a very old poster that comes from like the late 60s, early 70s, and it's a joke, right? But I think many of us are still busy with this. So the poster says, are you lonely, tired of working on your own? Do you hate making decisions? Hold a meeting. You can see people, show charts, feel important, point with a stick, eat donuts, impress your colleagues, and all on company times. Meetings, the practical alternative to work. Now that, although it's a joke, takes us right back to where we started, the beliefs and kind of legacy that we have inherited, which we really have to start unpacking in order to have much more effective meetings. So you need to meet regularly. You need more meetings, not less. You need to have a variety of meetings. You need to build a real-time agenda based on what is important right now, rather than having routines that you mindlessly go through. You need to learn how to stay on track with tapping and tailing so that people understand what to prepare emotionally and practically and what work you're going to do. You need to focus on feed forward, which is to recap your decisions and actions and agree what is going to happen. What do we expect from each other going forward? So these are some of the concepts I've talked about. I noticed we're nearly out of time. So I'm not necessarily going to go through all of them because they are self-explanatory. Just a moment to say that I have built a playbook based on the things that I've spoken about, which really covers some of those ideas. But what I would really now like to do, hopefully I've lit a fire rather than poured a whole lot of information into an empty bucket, because I know everybody on this call is accomplished, has got lots of experience, is wrestling with different things and learning and knows different things. So I think we're out of time. I'm not sure what happened to Tracy. We can maybe take a few questions, but we are in fact out of time. So I am going to share my details with anybody who would like to. And I'm just really grateful that you took the time to listen. Trace, I'm going to hand it over to you.
I'm here and I've been listening to every word that you've been saying. I'm not sure if you saw my comments in the chat box. I was giving you kind of the 30-minute, 45-minute. But I must say that, first of all, thank you so much for this conversation. And it's going to definitely be a word that I'm going to adopt going forward. All the conversations that we have with you have been absolutely outstanding. I personally go into them and I never know what the expectation is, but I always know it will be exceptional and superb. And I love the way that you started and you went into this webinar this morning and you said the greatest myth that exists about meetings is that they're inherently bad. And I thank you for showing each and every single participant on this call this morning how valuable they actually are. And with changing the way that we think, the way that we structure it, and the outcomes that these conversations can lead to has been so incredibly valuable. My only wish is that we'd had all our registrants join us. I'm sure they will watch the recording. And Lon, thank you from myself, Helene, the Orchard team, Ellis, I'm sure Ellis will thank you as well, for an absolutely incredible, valuable, and exceptional webinar.